3 true horror stories about Dead of Night that you didn't know. Welcome to Dark Timeless Creeps, DC, where the most terrifying stories come to life under the cover of night. Tonight we venture into the darkest hours, where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur, and the night becomes the stage for horrifying encounters. These are 3 true stories that happened in the dead of night, where the silence was broken by the unexplainable, the sinister, and the supernatural. Hold tight, because once the clock strikes midnight, reality begins to slip away, and you might find yourself questioning the shadows that lurk in the corners of your room. Are you brave enough to hear these bone-chilling true stories? Keep watching as we dive into the mysteries of the dead of night, only here on DTC, Dark Timeless Creeps. Story 1. The Empty House. The protagonist, John Stevens. John Stevens is a middle-aged man, a welder by trade, living in a large, isolated house on the outskirts of New Hampshire. After the death of his beloved wife Emma from cancer, he is left alone in the house, with only his dog Bosley for company. The vast surroundings are full of memories, both joyful and painful. The house, once filled with laughter, love, and warmth, now echoes with an overwhelming silence and emptiness. John often reflects on the happy years he spent with Emma. Their days were filled with shared dreams, plans for the future, and deep affection. But now, that love is nothing more than a series of photographs, mementos, and objects that once belonged to her. The house, which was once a sanctuary of warmth, now feels like a cold, desolate place. The echoes of their past life together haunt him every day. His mind drifts back to those moments, Emma's smile, her laughter, the way they used to fill the house with joy. But those memories now seem distant and unreachable, like whispers fading in the wind. As the nights grow darker and longer, the house becomes a place of strange occurrences. John begins to hear noises that can't be explained. The sounds of footsteps echoing from the upper floor, whispering voices that seem to call out his name, and faint rustlings in the hallways. These things unsettle him deeply. He often wakes in the middle of the night to the sound of someone moving through the rooms, only to find nothing when he checks. Yet the unease lingers. One particular night, he sees a shadow pass by the bedroom window, Emma's old bedroom. But when he rushes to investigate, everything is still. No one is there. The sensation of being watched remains, a constant presence in the corner of his mind. One evening, after hearing a loud crash from Emma's bedroom, John decides to investigate. He's used to strange noises by now, but this one felt different, urgent, almost as though something important had happened. As he enters the room, everything seems normal, but there is an inexplicable sense of change in the air. It's as though the room is no longer the same place he remembers. The light flickers, the air feels heavier, and then the most unsettling thing of all happens. Their wedding photo hanging on the wall suddenly falls to the ground without explanation. The strange events escalate. John becomes more aware of the eerie presence in the house. One night he catches a glimpse of someone standing at the window of Emma's old room. The figure is shrouded in darkness, and the face is unclear, but the shape and posture are hauntingly familiar. It looks like Emma, yet it doesn't. The next night, the sounds grow louder, more distinct, as if someone is trying to communicate with him from beyond. He can no longer dismiss these occurrences as his imagination. Something supernatural is at play in this house. Unable to ignore the increasing phenomena, John decides to confront whatever is haunting him. He climbs the stairs to the upper floor, his heart pounding in his chest. As he approaches Emma's bedroom, he feels the weight of a presence pressing down on him. The air is thick, suffocating. The door creaks open, and there, standing in the center of the room, is a figure. It is not Emma. The face is unfamiliar, cold, hollow, and terrifying. The woman before him is dressed in a faded white gown, her long black hair flowing like a dark waterfall. Her eyes are empty, as though they hold nothing but darkness. The air feels charged, electric, as if the room itself is alive. The figure turns to face him, and for a brief moment John feels his heart stop. The voice that escapes the woman's lips is not Emma's, but something far more sinister. "John, why are you still here? You must leave before it's too late," she whispers, her voice echoing in his mind. John tries to back away, but his feet feel heavy, as though the very floor is holding him in place. The room grows darker, the shadows swirling around him. He can't escape. The door slams shut behind him, and the windows grow opaque with an unnatural fog. The house itself feels alive, trapping him within its walls. John realizes he is no longer just dealing with memories of Emma. This is something far worse, something ancient and malevolent. The house itself is a prison, holding not just the spirits of the past, but also an evil force that is feeding off his fear. Every night, John becomes more consumed by the strange occurrences. The line between the living and the dead blurs. He is not just haunted by memories of his wife, but by the relentless presence of entities far darker than he ever imagined. The whispers in the night grow louder, and the shadows seem to stretch longer, like dark tendrils pulling him into their grasp. One night, as the terror reaches its peak, John finds himself on the brink of insanity. In his delirium, Emma's memory reappears. He hears her voice in the silence, sees her face in his dreams. She is there, in the shadows, in the very walls of the house. For a moment, it feels as though she's calling to him, telling him to let go, to escape the house and the ghosts that haunt it. But can he truly let go of her? Can he truly escape the memories of their love? Or is he forever bound to this place? The house, it seems, holds not only his past but his future as well, an endless loop of grief and loss. As John digs deeper into the house's history, he uncovers a terrifying secret. Emma, before her death, had begun to research the house's origins. She discovered a dark history, an event that occurred many years ago, which had bound the spirits of the house to this place. The house was not just a home for John and Emma, it was a prison for restless souls. John learns that Emma had been trying to uncover the truth about the house before she died. But the truth was too dangerous, too powerful, and now John finds himself caught in the same trap. The spirits of the house are not all from the present. Some are ancient, their souls bound to the house for centuries. These spirits are trapped by a malevolent force, one that is feeding off their pain and suffering. John realizes that his fate is intertwined with theirs. He is not just trying to survive, he is trying to free these souls, to break the curse that binds them. But can he succeed where Emma failed? John comes to a horrifying realization. He cannot leave the house unless he solves the mystery of the curse. The supernatural forces that haunt him will not let him go without a fight. But will he be strong enough to defeat them? Will he be able to break the chains that bind the souls and free himself from this hellish nightmare? Every night, the house grows more oppressive, more dangerous. The line between life and death is thinner than ever before, and John is running out of time. In the end, John uncovers the secret to breaking the curse. However, it comes with a terrible price. To free the souls trapped in the house, he must make a sacrifice, one that will change him forever. He must give up everything he holds dear. With a heavy heart, he faces the truth. To save the house, he must walk away from everything he once knew. The moment of reckoning arrives. The last ghost fades away, and John is free. But it is not a victory without its cost. John leaves the house, not just to escape, but to find peace within himself. The house falls into obscurity, forgotten by all who once knew it. But the memories of Emma, the haunting events, and the ghosts of the past will follow him wherever he goes. He can never truly escape them. They will live on in his heart, in his mind, like marks that cannot be erased. The real escape, he realizes, is not from the house, but from the hold the past has on him. True freedom comes from within, from the ability to live with the memories and find peace despite the darkness that once consumed him. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, Dark Timeless Creeps, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 2. The terrifying encounter at McDonald's. Jake was no stranger to long, lonely nights. As a delivery driver for a late-night food service, he often found himself driving through empty streets, his car headlights the only thing breaking the oppressive darkness. The solitude of the night was a constant companion, but tonight something felt different. After a long shift, exhausted to the point of weariness, Jake was craving only one thing: a quick meal to fuel his tired body and calm his nerves. At 2 a.m., Jake pulled into the McDonald's parking lot. The golden glow of the restaurant's lights was the only bright spot in the dark, quiet town. He was drained, and he quickly went inside to grab something simple to eat. Nothing special, just something fast and easy. But when Jake came back out, he noticed something unusual: a Volkswagen parked in a dim, secluded corner of the lot. It caught his eye for a brief moment, but he didn't think much of it. He assumed it was just a coincidence, or maybe some other late-night customer. But when he drove back through the lot a few minutes later, the Volkswagen was still there. It hadn't moved. It was parked exactly where it had been, sitting quietly in the dark under the flickering lights. A sense of unease began creeping into Jake's mind. He couldn't explain it, but something felt off. He tried to shake it off and decided to drive to a nearby forested area to eat in peace, away from the lights and noise of the restaurant. As he parked his car by the edge of the woods and opened his food, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. He glanced back toward the McDonald's parking lot. The Volkswagen was still there, unmoving. His unease turned into outright suspicion. Why was that car still parked there? Why hadn't it left? Jake called his friend Sarah, trying to ease his mind. "Hey, want to meet up? Take a walk up the hill? I don't know, something feels off." Sarah agreed, and after a few minutes she arrived, and together they began walking up the trail leading to the top of the nearby mountain. The trail was a familiar one they had hiked countless times, but tonight every step felt heavier, more foreboding. As they neared the summit, where they usually sat to look over the town below, the peacefulness of the night was shattered. A chill ran down Jake's spine as he noticed 4 men standing off to the side in the shadows. The men didn't look like ordinary hikers or locals. They stood eerily still, their eyes glinting in the dim light, their bodies tense with an unsettling presence. The air between them and Jake thickened with tension, and it was clear that something was wrong. One of the men, taller than the rest, stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as they locked with Jake's. Jake's heart skipped a beat. The man didn't say a word. He just stared, unblinking, a chilling smile creeping up the side of his mouth. Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This man wasn't just any stranger. Jake knew him. He recognized him from news reports. The same man who had been fired from his job after harassing his ex-girlfriend and stalking her for months. And now, here he was, standing just a few feet away. The realization hit Jake like a punch to the gut. The unsettling feeling he'd been carrying all night wasn't just paranoia. This was real. He was being watched. and the man in front of him wasn't just a random passerby, he was a predator. Jake's instincts screamed at him to run, but his body felt frozen, as if the fear had paralyzed him. The other 3 men remained silent, but their presence was just as threatening. They didn't speak, didn't move, but their eyes followed every movement Jake and Sarah made. The atmosphere had shifted from awkward to dangerous in an instant. Jake's mind raced. What was going on? Were these men connected to the strange car he had seen earlier? Had they been watching him from the beginning? Then, as if on cue, the man who had stepped forward took another step closer, his eyes never leaving Jake's. The air around them seemed to crackle with a cold, menacing energy. Jake realized that these men weren't just a random group of strangers. They were predators, and they were closing in. Their motives were unclear, but their intentions were undeniable, and now it was too late to back away. "Run!" Jake hissed to Sarah, his voice barely a whisper. Without thinking, he grabbed her hand and they bolted into the darkness. Every step was a desperate attempt to escape. They heard the footsteps of the men behind them, but they dared not look back. Every breath felt like it could be their last. Their hearts pounded in their chests and their legs burned with the strain of running as fast as they could, but they couldn't stop. Not now, not with the danger so close. They stumbled down the mountain, the ground beneath them uneven and treacherous. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, their bodies on the verge of collapse, but they kept running, driven by the primal fear that something much worse was lurking just behind them. The men were still following. They hadn't slowed down. The sound of their footsteps grew louder, closer. Jake could almost feel their hot breath on his neck. Sarah screamed as she tripped over a rock, but Jake didn't stop. He grabbed her arm, pulling her up, and together they kept moving, faster, faster, toward the safety of the car. The distant town lights seemed miles away, but the car was their only chance. The only way they could escape this nightmare. As they reached the bottom of the hill, they could see the faint outline of their vehicle parked in the distance. Jake's hands shook as he fumbled for the keys, his panic mounting with every passing second. He finally managed to unlock the door, and they scrambled inside, slamming the door shut behind them. But just as Jake started the engine, one of the men appeared in front of the car, blocking their path. He stood there, tall and menacing, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Where do you think you're going?" he said, his voice low and menacing. The words sent a chill through Jake's spine. It was a threat, plain and simple. Jake didn't hesitate. His foot slammed on the gas pedal, and the car roared to life. The tires squealed as he drove off, the headlights cutting through the darkness. The men didn't follow immediately, but Jake could feel their presence lingering in the night, as if they were watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The ride back to the safety of the town was a blur. Jake's mind raced, his heart still pounding in his chest. Every turn, every shadow felt like a potential threat. When they finally reached the town, they pulled into a well-lit parking lot, and only then did Jake allow himself to breathe again. He and Sarah sat there in stunned silence for a moment, the gravity of the situation sinking in. They immediately called the police, recounting everything they had experienced. When the officers arrived, they recognized the man Jake had identified immediately. He was a known stalker, a criminal with a long history of harassment and intimidation. The police launched an investigation, but by the time they arrived at the mountain, the group of men had disappeared. They had vanished without a trace, as if they had never been there at all. In the days that followed, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every corner seemed to hide an unseen presence. It was a nightmare that haunted him long after the incident. He couldn't help but wonder, had they really escaped, or had this terrifying encounter only just begun? That night, Jake learned a hard lesson. Not everything is just a coincidence. Sometimes things are far more dangerous than they appear. The unexpected can turn into a nightmare in the blink of an eye, and when that happens, only quick thinking and swift action can save your life. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC Dark Timeless Creeps and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story: The Haunted Church, Secrets Beneath the Surface. The group of friends had always been drawn to the thrill of the unknown. Since their teenage years, they had spent countless nights exploring abandoned buildings, chasing the adrenaline rush that came with sneaking into forgotten places. But none of their adventures had prepared them for what awaited them in the church on the outskirts of town. This church, though decaying and forgotten by time, had an undeniable draw. Its towering steeple loomed over the town like a dark sentinel. Locals whispered stories of strange happenings and cursed rituals, but the group never paid much attention. To them, it was just another old building to explore. Every weekend, they would drive out there, laughing and joking as they snuck inside, their flashlights illuminating the crumbling pews and shattered windows. They'd drink, talk about their futures, and let their imaginations run wild, not realizing that the church was holding far darker secrets than they could ever imagine. The door to the unknown. On one particular night, the atmosphere felt different. The sky was thick with clouds, and the wind howled through the cracked windows of the church, rattling the panes like an ominous warning. The group gathered in the main hall, taking in the familiar sight of their favorite spot: the cracked stained glass windows, the dust-covered pews, and the echoes of their own voices. But something wasn't right tonight. There was an unsettling stillness in the air, a strange tension that made the hairs on their necks stand up. They decided to go deeper into the church, beyond the areas they usually explored, hoping to uncover something new. The deeper they went, the more the atmosphere seemed to change. The air grew colder, the shadows longer, and their breaths grew heavier as the oppressive silence enveloped them. They could hear nothing but the sound of their own footsteps, echoing eerily through the empty halls. The floor creaked beneath their feet, as if the very church was groaning in protest, urging them to turn back. But curiosity drove them onward. They stumbled upon a door, hidden behind a fallen piece of debris, almost as though someone had been trying to keep it shut. Intrigued, they pushed it open, unaware of the danger that lay beyond. Inside was a small, dimly lit room, but the air was thick, heavy with something they couldn't quite place. It felt like the room was watching them. Their flashlights flickered erratically, casting strange shadows across the walls. But it wasn't just the darkness that unnerved them. The room seemed to hum with a low, almost imperceptible vibration, as though the very ground beneath their feet was alive. In the center of the room stood a large mirror, its frame tarnished with age. It reflected the faint glow of their flashlights, but something was off. The reflection didn't look quite right. It was distorted, almost as if the mirror was warping reality itself. But it was the blood that really caught their attention. At first, they thought it was just some old paint, but as they stepped closer, they realized it wasn't paint at all. The stains were fresh, too fresh, and the metallic scent of blood filled their nostrils. It was everywhere, on the floor, the walls, dripping from the ceiling in thick, dark droplets. The air grew thick with an unsettling presence, and they felt it, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. The unseen force. A sudden noise broke the tension, an unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls of the church. But the group froze. No one else should have been there. They were the only ones who knew about this place. The sound grew louder, closer, as if something or someone was approaching. Their hearts pounded in their chests. They turned to leave, but the door they had entered through slammed shut with an overwhelming force. The room seemed to constrict around them, the walls closing in, the air thick with the weight of an unseen presence. Claire, one of the bravest of the group, reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in. Her breath quickened as she struggled, her fingers slipping on the handle. The others backed away, looking around in desperation. They could hear the footsteps now, growing louder, but there was no one in sight. It was as if the building itself was alive, playing tricks on them. The shadows seemed to stretch and move, twisting into figures that seemed to watch their every move. Then the mirror shattered. The glass exploded outward in a burst of jagged pieces, each fragment catching the dim light. Claire screamed, stumbling backward as a shard grazed her arm, drawing a line of crimson across her skin. The blood that had once stained the floor now began to writhe as though it were alive, crawling toward them. The walls began to hum, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to penetrate their bones. The temperature in the room plummeted, and a cold wind swept through the room, carrying whispers, soft, unintelligible whispers that seemed to beckon them forward. And then the figure appeared, a shadow in the doorway. At first they thought it was one of them, but the shape was wrong, too tall, too unnatural. It stood there, motionless, watching them with eyes that gleamed like dark pools. The group's breath caught in their throats, their bodies frozen in terror. The figure took a step forward, and the sound of its footsteps echoed like thunder, shaking the walls. Without warning, the air erupted in a loud, deafening crash. The figure lunged, its body a blur of motion, but just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. The door to the room flung open, and the group, with no hesitation, bolted from the room, running through the church's endless hallways. The escape, but at what cost? They reached the front door, but it wouldn't open. It was as if the building itself had sealed them inside. They could hear the figure moving closer, its footsteps echoing from all sides. Fear surged through them as they pulled at the door, pushing with all their strength. With one final effort, the door crashed open. The group spilled out into the night, gasping for air, hearts racing. But as they looked back, they saw something they could never explain. Standing in the doorway of the church, silhouetted against the dim light inside, was the figure. It was watching them, waiting. They ran, not stopping until they were far away, but the feeling of being hunted never left them. Claire, who had been closest to the mirror, began experiencing strange occurrences. Objects moved in her room, doors creaked open on their own, and whispers filled the air at night. She felt like something was following her, no matter where she went. The others weren't immune to the feeling either. They too began to experience strange happenings, dreams of the church, visions of the figure watching them from the shadows. The unease grew until it became unbearable. The curse of the church. As time passed, the group began to investigate the church's history. They learned that it had once been a place of dark rituals, a site where the town's ancestors had practiced occult ceremonies in secret. The fire that had destroyed it years ago was no accident. It had been an attempt to rid the church of its evil. But the spirits, it seemed, were not so easily banished. It was then that they discovered something even more horrifying: the mirror. They found that the church wasn't truly abandoned. After their visit, a few locals began to report strange sightings, figures moving in and out of the church at night. But when the authorities investigated, all they found was the mirror, restored to its original state, standing untouched in the center of the room. The group, now terrified, realized that they hadn't just been exploring an abandoned church, they had disturbed something far more dangerous. The church was not merely haunted, it was alive, and whatever it had awakened in them was not something that could be forgotten. One by one, the friends were drawn back to the church, compelled by an unseen force. The whispers that had once been faint grew louder, more insistent, calling them back to the place they had once fled. And in the church, the figure waited, its presence ever growing, ever hungry. The final confrontation. As the group returned to the church, it was clear that the building had changed. The air was heavier, the shadows darker, and the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. They could hear the faint sound of chanting coming from the depths of the church, and they knew that they had no choice but to face whatever awaited them. With each step they took toward the heart of the church, the ground beneath them seemed to shift, pulling them deeper into its grasp. The mirror loomed ahead, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow, as though it were calling them. And in the darkness the figure waited, its eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. As they stepped forward, ready to confront their fate, the whispers reached a crescendo. Time seemed to slow as they felt themselves drawn into the mirror's depths. It was then that they realized there was no escape. The church had claimed them, and they were now part of its curse, forever bound to its dark secret. As the darkness deepens and the stories grow more unsettling, we venture deeper into the unknown together. Each chilling tale brings us closer to the eerie truths lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The terror doesn't stop here, it only gets worse. Subscribe to DTC Dark Timeless Creeps now and stay on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows next. Hit that notification bell and prepare for the next terrifying chapter. Remember, in the world of DTC, the creeps are always waiting, and they never rest. iMoon,